marigolds, and they're still providing nice flowers at this time of the year. Indeed, it's the first time that we've actually grown flowers within the vegetable garden, and I have to say it's been really successful. Since so much insect activity while these have been in the garden, especially bees, which obviously help to pollinate things and do a lot of good in the garden. It's come to that time of year now though when we're getting seed heads. You can see there's some there, and we shall save those and plant them on next year, and they'll be next year's marigolds. Anyway, today what I thought we'd do is have a quick tour through the garden so you can see how it's changed, how it's evolved. Obviously we're into October now, so we're into autumn, and there are different vegetables to harvest. There are vegetables that have gone into the garden which will be ready for next year, so I thought we'd just have a quick look around the garden so you can see exactly what is going on. So in this bed here, this is what we call bed 1. We did have broad beans in here earlier in the year, which you saw us harvest in an earlier video, and they were then replaced with purple sprouting broccoli and a row of cauliflower. The purple sprouting broccoli is a variety called Rudolph, and although many of the seed packets say you want to sow it sort of March, April time and get it out, this actually didn't go into the ground until somewhere near the end of July. And so that I don't have to keep explaining myself all of the time, what I will say is that with all the brassicas that are here now, before they were transplanted, I put them out to harden off. And I think while they were doing that, the old cabbage butterfly got on them and laid some eggs. Because soon after we'd transplanted them, we suddenly found that they went skeletoid. But as you can see now, they look really healthy. We came out and picked all the caterpillars off that were on there, plus we got all the eggs off that had been laid. And you can see they've recovered really well. Now, one thing I do need to do is to harvest a cauliflower. The cauliflower you see here is a variety called Autumn Giant. We've grown it for the last 2 or 3 years. It never lets us down. You can see there's a lovely cauliflower in there. One of the mistakes that people do... Hello, Poppy's chasing the pigeons away. Good girl! We do have problems with pigeons in our garden, because towards the back of the garden we do have woodland. Poppy's really good at chasing them away. She never catches them, but she chases them away. Anyway, I digress. One of the things that I see other people do is that they leave these cauliflowers and think, well, they'll get a little bigger. And it may well get a little bigger, but you know what? That's a gorgeous cauliflower, and I want to eat that tomorrow with our Sunday roast. So I'm going to harvest it today. It'll be fine, and it'll keep really well for tomorrow. So let's have that off there. Take the outer leaves off so you can see what it is. Do you know what? I'm really pleased with that. That's a gorgeous cauliflower. Yeah, absolutely gorgeous, and we shall enjoy that tomorrow evening with our Sunday roast. Autumn Giant. What a lovely cauliflower. And this way, when you pick them like this, well, you don't have to fear them rising to go to seed, because it's something that they will do. And that's a good sized cauliflower. There's some nice food on there. Next door to the cauliflower and the purple sprouting broccoli was where we planted our winter savoys, and this is a variety called Rigoletto. Again, just like the cauliflower and the purple sprouting broccoli that we were talking about before, these were transplanted in July. And you can see they're really starting to hearten up quite nicely now. The leaves are all turning in. and looking really quite good. And I've been pottering around in the garden and taking some of the leaves off that, in my opinion anyway, are no longer doing much for the plant. There's one you can see it's been eaten with. It just helps keep the slug population down. And I know that sounds really bizarre because you think the slugs are slugs, they're going to be there anyway. But from what I've heard from other people, you know, a slug's role in the garden is actually to clear up the waste. So the more you leave about ready for them to eat, the more they're going to come. We do get slightly less here because we are no dig, and yeah, I don't particularly think they like the rough surface. I have actually been around these, so I don't need to do that here and now, but as you can see, they're looking really, really good, and just like the purple sprouting broccoli and the cauliflowers, these again, when they were outside being hardened off, they did look very sorry for themselves shortly after we transplanted them. And I didn't think we were going to get anything. But it just goes to show you, if you can spot the danger in time and do something about it, in our case, i.e. pulling the caterpillars off that had hatched and getting the eggs off that they'd already laid on there, they can recover really quite nicely. And then one of the changes that's happened in the garden is that we've planted our overwintering onions and our overwintering spring onions. Spring onions are a variety called Guardsman, and we've grown those all throughout this year. They're multi-sown, and there could be up to 10 seeds per cell. They were sown back end of August, and they were planted out probably 2-3 weeks ago now. And you can see they're looking really quite good. The weather does take a real bad turn for the worse when we get one of those winters where you think, I shall fleece them, just to help them along. And with the overwintering onions, there's up to 6 or 7 seeds per cell. They've been planted out, and as you saw me do earlier in the year, I shall thin those out when they get to spring onion stage and thin them down to sort of 4 to 5 onions per cell, or per transplant, should I say. All I have done here is spread some of our homemade compost, and this particular compost I don't think really got quite hot enough. There are a few weeds poking their way through, but there's nothing wrong there. We can go and pull those out. They're so easy to pull out when it's no dig and they're just in compost, and run a hoe through so that they die off. So this is bed 2, or we call bed 2, and here we grew our sweet corn and squash. You can see now we've harvested all the squash, so one of the jobs that I need to do now is to take these from the ground and they'll go onto the compost heap. And we got a really great harvest of crown prince and curry squash from here. However, they did rather take over. It was like Day of the Triffids around here. And we also planted a row of butternut squash, and the poor things were so covered up they just didn't see the light of day. So this is the result of our butternut squash. They're going to be really tiny, but hey ho, a lesson for next year: give them a bit more room, and we will be able to get all of the squash that we indeed want. Next door to those is some more cauliflower. Again, they went in back in July, back end of July this year. They're a variety called Sendis, and they're due to mature December, January. So again, we've got some continuity going on with our cauliflower. Here we are on which we call bed number 4, and you'll probably remember earlier that I planted some pak choy and some Chinese cabbage. This was the onion bed before. All our onions were grown here before. Now unfortunately the pak choy, a lot of them went to seed. Indeed you can see one at the end there that's decided to go to seed, which is a real shame because it looks like a really nice plant, and that's done that in the last day. And I think a lot of it was because of the really hot weather we had during mid-September, and it was really hot. I don't think they liked it. We are having a stir fry this evening, so we're going to have a pak choy, so let's harvest this one. Leave as much of the compost and soil there as we can. You can see, lovely pak choy, and they were literally planted in mid-September. That's how quickly they grow. Strangely enough, the Chinese cabbage didn't get affected at all. None of them have bolted. They're turning in quite nicely, and yeah, we'll be able to use those with our stir fries. Here we are with the leeks. We're in bed 4, and it was the onion bed. These were transplanted mid-June, and are start to come to a nice size for harvest now. I've already just harvested a couple of oarsmen. My youngest daughter is actually going to make a nice leek and potato soup this evening, so she said, "Dad, please get me some leeks out of the garden." So we've done the oarsman. This is a variety called Porbella, and I've grown Porbella now for 2 or 3 seasons now. I find it a really good leek in that it comes ready October time, but it stands really well in the garden. And just like a lot of people, I did the holes 6 inches deep, and in goes the transplant. So they go down quite a bit. Now in no-dig garden, it can be quite difficult to get out of the ground, just like as we find with parsnips. So all I do is just loosen the soil with my trowel, my trusty trowel. It's a lovely trowel because it's one that my grandson actually bought me when his parents bought when he was about 2 or 3 years old. You can see it says Grandad and Charlie's, and there's a fork that also go with it, so I always get a lot of joy using this when I'm in the garden. I'm not going to dig anything in particular, I'm just going to loosen the soil around, which is what I do with the parsnips, so that we're not digging big holes. Just literally want to loosen the soil around so that we can ease the leek out of the ground. There she comes. There you go. There's a Porbella. And that's how we harvest leeks here in our no-dig garden, to disturb the soil as little as possible. All I'll do is just pat that back down. So there we are, a couple of fine leeks. As I say, this one is Porbella. I have harvested already a couple of oarsmen, so yeah, leeks are coming into season now, and yeah, fantastic, absolutely fantastic. And then beside the leeks, you can see we have our French beans and our runner beans. Runner beans are actually still producing quite well. So are these, but I've decided to let these stay on here so that I can get some seed for next season. Hence why I haven't picked these. We've had an absolutely abundance of harvest off these, both the climber French beans and the runner beans. And I'll probably do the same with the rest of these runner beans, in that I'll let any remaining pods on there brown off and go to seed, so that I can use the seed for next year. So here in between, if you remember, between the French beans and the runner beans, this is where we transplanted our celery plants. And if you've watched my earlier videos, you know that my preferred method through the summer is to harvest the outer stalks and take exactly what I want. We are sort of, not mid-October, but early-ish October. And it won't be long now before we see a frost. And when we see that frost, it will kill these plants. So I'm harvesting them now, as they are, because we do like to make all of our own stocks here. And all I do is twist them out of the ground and dig them up. There we are. Lovely fresh celery. And we use quite a bit of this. What I shall do, as once I know that there is a frost coming, around here the first predicted frost date of the year will be around about November the 10th, something like that. But of course it could come earlier, who knows. But if I know that there's a frost coming, then I shall harvest this and we shall cut it up into chunks and freeze it. That which we can't use fresh, we will freeze it. And in the main we use a lot of this for our casseroles, stocks, stews. So the fact that it's frozen, it's still going to release its flavour into our cooking. And you can drop it straight in there from being frozen. You don't even have to defrost it. And it'll happily cook away in your casseroles and your stews. There you go. So this is bed 3, and in bed 3, see just to this side, these were the carrots that we sowed back in March of this year. Now of course they got far too big and probably a bit too woody for us to eat now, but I'm harvesting as we go along because, as I mentioned before, we do make a lot of our own stocks here. And they're ideal for that because they release their flavour, but we don't particularly want to eat them like that. The other varieties we grew in Norwich, we've now finished those now, so now we're on to our autumn winter carrots. And as you can see, I've grown Chantenay and a variety called Eskimo. Today I'm going to harvest 1 or 2 of the Chantenay because we want a few carrots. So again, just like with the leeks, just put the trowel in, just loosen things so that we can ease them out. And there we are, look at those. Lovely example of a Chantenay carrot. Just the right size. Well, the right size for us anyway. Like I say, all I do is just ease them out of the ground. Some will be bigger than others, some will be smaller than others. But to us, it doesn't really matter, it's all about the flavour. What we have done, we've kept these covered ever since they went in. They went in mid-June. They followed the calibres that we had growing here. So once we'd harvested those and twisted those out of the ground, we then planted these. As you can see, not a trace of carrot fly anywhere. All grown really quite well. So that's really helped, and really pleased about that, because last year we did get the carrot fly on our autumn carrots. And somebody said that, yeah, once you get to sort of the back end of September, you can uncover them. And up until then, I hadn't really seen much evidence of carrot fly. They clearly got in there during that period, and when we were doing our main harvest of carrots, as I say, for autumn and winter, sort of late October, November, they were absolutely riddled with carrot flies. So a lesson learnt for us last year, and if I were you, I would keep carrots covered all of the time and just remove the cloches, as I've done, as and when you want to harvest them. So still in bed 3, the very first video that we made, you saw me plant the kale and sprouts, and in here we had our overwintering onions growing from last year, and when we'd harvested those, these were then transplanted into the ground. We have a couple of types of kale here. We have dwarf green curly. You wouldn't think they're quite so dwarf though, would you? They've been really good. We've been harvesting the kale now for the last few weeks. We also have Cavolo Nero, and the sprout that we're growing is a variety called Brody. We've managed to successfully keep the cabbage white butterfly away from these. They've been closhed all year, ever since they went into the ground. And I think I said in that video, I've always wanted for years, people have told me that the sprout tops are really quite lovely. They form a mini cabbage, so it's very sprouty. Well, they haven't got to them this year, so hopefully I'm going to get that this year. So these were transplanted in June, mid-June, and you can see the sprouts are all forming. It'll be another month or so before I want to start eating sprouts, because I like eating them from mid-November, obviously through into Christmas and beyond into the new year. So yeah, really, really good. I do need some kale for today, so harvest some Cavolo Nero. All I do is just take these off. What we do is just take the middle rib out and use this lovely kale here. Anything that's slightly damaged, then we'll remove. You know, you're always going to get some damage, and some of the leaves that are not quite so good. You know, they are brassicas after all. So there's that harvest here. I can actually see on this. This is what I mean by when I say, like, you know, not so much damage, but you know, that's doing no more good and certainly not edible. So let's have that off, and that can go off to the compost heap. Same here with the sprouts. That leaf is doing absolutely nothing for that plant. Neither is this one. Neither is this. It's not going to harm the plant whatsoever. You see so easily that breaks off. That, you know, that leaf it's yellow, isn't it? It's doing absolutely nothing. Helps keep things tidy, doesn't it, Poppy? Helps keep Mr. Slug at bay. You can see when they do get like this. There we go. They actually fall off on their own. You can see the slugs have been about. It's their job, it's their role in the garden to get rid of all this waste. So why encourage them? Let's try to keep these as tidy as possible. You may think maybe I haven't, but I have been around these in the last week or so. Yeah, that's how I like to try and keep things nice and tidy, and you know, I think if you can do the same too, then you'll find that you'll have less of a slug problem. And let's face it, there's lots of kale and lots of sprouts here that we'll be able to eat. Leaves such as this, which are no longer any good to the plant, they'll actually go onto the compost heap and they will feed the soil for next year. So absolutely nothing is wasted here. And if you look in between here, we can get the camera down here, look how lovely and clean the soil is. In years gone by, when I used to dig my soil, this would just be so full of weed. And I think that's why these plants look so good, and why we're getting such an abundance of harvest, because they're not competing with weeds. They're just being here and allowed to be themselves and grow just as they should. So still in bed 3 and next door to the kale and sprouts. This is where we planted our Swede. And Swede have always been a bit of an enigma to me. We've always tried to grow them every year, and I just don't think they really liked our clay soil. The soil can often get very saturated. You can see the soil is not saturated here, it's still really quite lovely, and you know, and we've had a lot of heavy rain here over the last few days. Lots of rain, but I do think the mulch is really helping. It retains the water and releases it to the plants as and when they need it. And as a result, I've actually got some really quite nice looking Swedes coming along. So really looking forward to eating those in the next 5 to 6 weeks. They're swelling up nicely. And yeah, hopefully this year we're going to get some really nice Swedes. Normally we get very sort of spindly ones. In fact, they're just like a root, really. A long root like a carrot. And they don't tend to swell up like this as we've grown them in our normal clay soil as before. I was hoping that going to no dig would enable us to grow some really nice Swedes. I'm sure people have grown bigger Swedes, may have even grown better Swedes, but believe it when I tell you, these are some of the best Swedes that we've ever grown. So you can see, if you want to see exactly what happens when you get white cabbage butterfly, this is what happens. And as I said earlier, I don't want to keep repeating myself, but as with all the brassicas that were put out to harden off, I think they got on here when they were just tiny transplants. We hadn't spotted it, and just like the rest of them, they hadn't been in the ground very long when, yeah, we suddenly realised that, you know, they were there and there were caterpillars there. So just like the rest of the brassicas, I really feared for these plants and thought, these are not really going to come to much. But yeah, we took the eggs off that we could see, took the caterpillars off that we could see, and as you can see, you know, they've grown, you know, nice Swedes. I'm sure they would have been better if they hadn't been attacked, but they're producing some nice new growth anyway now. So that's what can happen, but if you can spot things early enough and deal with it, there's still a harvest to be had. So here we are in bed 5, what we call bed 5, and in here were all our main crop potatoes. They've also been harvested now and are in storage, ready for us to use. In front of those, this is where we transplanted our Celeriac, and you can see they're starting to come to a harvestable size. We do like Celeriac. Celeriac soup is absolutely wonderful. And what does it do at this time of the year? Just take some of the leaves off that aren't doing so well, just to let the crown get as much sun as possible. It's interesting to note here too that we've given these no extra water. It's not been the hottest of summers this year, so we certainly haven't needed to, but yeah, they've been growing quite nicely in no dig soil, and yeah, they've got themselves to quite a nice size, so we're really quite pleased with that. Probably noticed a few leaves about here. Well, we have a woodland behind us. One of the things this bed does suffer from is that in the autumn, when the leaves drop, down they come. So we're always trying to keep on top of that. So you may remember we posted a video a few weeks ago where we transplanted our spinach. Here it is. It's grown on really quite well, and yeah, we're going to get a harvest off that pretty soon. A little bit of damage, you're always going to get that. Nothing's ever going to be perfect when it's grown the way that we grow it, but a bit of damage, it's fine. You can see these plants have taken off, and they'll give us a harvest of fresh leaves now for the next few weeks, and then we'll leave them over the really cold period over winter, and then we'll start to get some more spinach as we get into next spring. And following the crop rotation, what we're doing here will actually be the climbing beans, so runner beans and French beans, and celery in between it, as you saw in the other bed. That one automatically moves up to here. So this spinach will rise to flower sometime getting towards June, but I'll twist it out in June anyway, in preparation to then transplant our celery and our climbing beans. And just before we just finish this video, I just wanted to show you what's going on with the compost bins. You probably remember I was at this one earlier in the year. There's not too much left now, but there it is. And as bits of the ground become vacant with plants, then we start to spread it on there. So this one was turned about 6 weeks ago into bay 2. Yeah, as you can see, it's looking really quite nice, and I'll be able to use that fairly soon as we go into November and December. Looking really good. And then if we go down to the bay 3, this is the one that we're currently filling. Was up to here, it's now risen. And even at this time of year, what are we, October the 8th or 9th, something like that. I can't remember the exact date, but it's something around there. You can see it's still sitting there at 50 degrees. So that's one already underway, ready for next year. It won't be long before this one will be full enough to cap off, and then we'll start another one in this bay. So yeah, from the harvest that we take through to the waste that we have from it that goes onto the compost heaps, we're either eating it or our gardeners eating it. That's the way I like to look at it anyway. So I hope you enjoyed a tour of our garden, or our veg garden anyway, and where we're up to, the changes that have taken place. Clearly we had a change of the season, and of course the garden changed too. The different harvests we get. See here, got some pak choy for this evening, we've got a cauliflower for tomorrow, we've also got some kale for this evening's meal. We've got some leeks, our lovely leeks, celery, and of course lovely chantenay carrots. So yeah, still harvesting things out of the garden, and we'll continue to harvest things as autumn goes on, and indeed into winter. Tomorrow I should be planting garlic and shallots. I always plant those at that time of the year. I find I get them a little bit earlier, which I can then clear that piece of ground to grow a preceding crop. So I always like to plant my shallots and garlic early to mid-October. So we'll film that and we'll post that video later on in the week. You can see exactly how we do it here in our new dig garden. Yeah, hopefully you'll enjoy that. We've taken on quite a few subscribers just lately, so thank you very much for that. It's really welcome to see that happen, and if you haven't done so already, please subscribe. If you like what we do, give us a thumbs up, yeah, please keep leaving your comments. I try to answer the questions as honestly as possible. You know, as I say, not everything's perfect here, but it is new dig. I've found it much easier this year, and as we go on through to the end of the year and into next year, we'll be able to see what year 2 will be like. So I hope you've had a really great weekend, and please stay safe, take care, and we shall see you again real soon in the garden.